Welcome home to St. Anne's. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you.
We're going to see if I remember how to be a priest all by myself. So I got really used to having a deacon. And exciting news, Sean was ordained a priest yesterday down at St. Andrews. So thank you to everyone who came out to help worship and support him in that. So we're going to see how I do all by myself now, if I remember where I need to be when I need to be there. It's really nice having someone who tells you where to go. Let's talk about the gospel today. But actually, so there is a lot of stuff in the gospel, but we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to talk about Acts, because I think it's a really cool story. And so the story in the gospel is really powerful, because in it we get the message that sometimes folks aren't going to accept the things that we do. They're going to be confused and worried, and that really bothers us sometimes, doesn't it? Because we want, when we are Christians, to be noticed that we're being Christians. We want that to change the world, right? And we get in this message from Jesus that sometimes that's not always going to be the case. And you know what? It doesn't matter, because Jesus' works point to God. And our works are supposed to point to Jesus. And sometimes that works for people, and sometimes it doesn't. But guess what? It was never about that anyway. It was never about us proving anything anyway. It was about us doing the work that we are called to do. And then that God handles the rest of it. So that's your really short gospel sermon right there. We good? All right, we're good. All right, because I love the story of Dorcas slash Tabitha slash whatever you want to call her. I don't know. She's nice. Because it's a really powerful story for us as Episcopalians, for us good white middle class, upper middle class folks. Because we suffer from white guilt, don't we? So we're going to have a very honest conversation about that. I'm going to talk about my experience with that. And what does that mean for us to be Christians in a world in which we've got a lot of power? We've got a lot of power in this world. And sometimes it can be really easy to deny that power, or to feel so guilty about that power that we're crippled by it. And so I want to talk about Dorcas slash Tabitha slash whatever you want to call her. Which is a really important thing that she's even named. We really don't get the names of women in the Bible a whole lot. And it can be really easy when we start to look at the Bible to assume that, especially in the early church, that women didn't have much of a role. But really, the church was women at the beginning of the early church. And that's because if you're going to have time to be planting churches, you're going to need a rich husband. And the men are busy working, so they don't have that kind of time. So guess who's doing it? The women. The women are running the churches. They're starting the churches. They're running the churches. And then every once in a while, a dude shows up to preach. You know, he happens to be in town. If Paul, drops in, he might stop in and do a nice little sermon or something. But really, it's the women who are doing it. And if you read a lot of Acts or Paul, you'll pick that up. That really it's the women who are doing this work. And the other important thing is that it's the women who have the time. So we have Tabitha or Dorcas, and I think that's a really important story to figure out. Not just that she was died or risen from the dead, because that seems to be the point of the story, right? That Peter strolls in and he works this miracle, and he's like, oh, see, the Lord did this. And they're all like, oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, my gosh, we totally are on board with Jesus. But we're already on board with Jesus, right? We're down with the Jesus thing. Okay, but really the power of this story is that you have this woman who has power. She has wealth. She's doing a lot. And yet she commits all of that to God. That's a big deal because that wasn't necessarily a popular thing to do at the time. And yet she's willing to take that power and influence that she has to try and make the world a better place. Because guess who's there when she's passed? It's the widows. It's the people that she's benefited. And I think it's so powerful that they're like, hey, Peter, look at what she made. Look at what she did for us and for our community. And Peter's like, you're right. She did incredible things for our community. She changed our community by being in the community and changing it, by using her power to make it a better place. And that is the message that you and I need to hear. Because when we come to our power and our influence, we go one of two ways. One, we cling to it because we're so afraid that we could lose it. And oh my gosh, what happens if I don't have it? We're threatened by that, right? Like, what if those people over there all of a sudden take all the stuff that I have? There's not enough for everybody. I'm like, yeah, there's technically enough for everybody. Did you know that starvation is purely political now? We actually have so much food that we throw some of it away in order to up prices. So when we have starvation in this world, it is purely political. It is an act of evil because it is used to harm and hurt people. We don't have people starving because we don't have enough. We have more than enough. We destroy stuff we have to make sure that people don't get it. Think about that for a second. We have more than enough, and yet we destroy it to harm others. So we do one of two things when we have power and influence. We cling to it because we're afraid of losing it, and we justify why we have it and others don't have it, right? We're like, well, I earned this. I earned my house in the suburbs. I worked really, really hard for that. And I'm not going to say I didn't work hard for it. I did. But there's a lot more to it than that. Or we do the other thing. We feel so guilty about it and we feel so bad about it that we're crippled and we just don't do anything. And we talk about, oh, it needs to change, but what are we doing? We don't do a whole lot with it, right? Because we feel so bad. And so we go to church and you let me yell at you for a while and you're like, oh, I feel really, really bad. And then we go on with the rest of our lives, right? I mean, sometimes I do that. I feel really, really bad, so I turn the TV off. Okay, so here's, I'm going to be super vulnerable with you because I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but I'm white. Like, really, really white. Like I get moonburn white. And I'm pretty obviously middle class, right? I mean, I have 2 professional degrees because I just collect them for fun. Like some people collect stamps. I collect master's degrees. And I have a pretty sweet little suburban family. My husband has a good job. God bless him. He's got health insurance because I need it. And we live in a sweet little, like, the image of suburbia. We live in Eagle Creek. If you know anything about Lee Summit, you know that that is like suburban of suburban. You don't get more suburban than Eagle Creek. I live there. I have 2 dogs and a cat. You don't get much more suburban than that. We have 2 cars, extremely suburban cars, one of which is a CRV. You don't get more suburban than that unless you have an Odyssey. Right? Like, and there are Odysseys here, right? You're like, I have a CRV. We got the Odysseys, right? We have the suburban cars. We are down with that, right? And that is the life in which I live. That is the water in which I swim. And so sometimes I really struggle with that because I know that that is not the real world. I know that my existence is not normal. And I honestly really struggled when I moved to Chicago for my master's degree in seminary. And I worked at a downtown hospital. I worked at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in downtown Chicago. And I was primarily an ER chaplain. That was my placement primarily. And heads up, I grew up in Iowa, like on a farm. And so at this time, I was like 22, 23. So you have like uber white girl, uber sheltered white girl, because I grew up upper middle class. Straight out of college, straight into seminary. And here I am in downtown Chicago. Northwestern, by the way, is like one of the Trauma One hospitals. So they get all the stuff, all the shootings, all the activity, right? And I remember one day they said to me, we need you to go sit with this family, but oh, by the way, we also need you to keep an eye out because we're worried about someone coming to finish the job. Yeah, there was a gang shooting. And he wasn't quite dead yet. And actually, he lived, which was pretty impressive because, anyway, we don't need to get into details. If you want details about my life in the ER, I'll share them with you later. But so here I am, like 23-year-old white girl, right? And I'm sitting in the ER in the midst of a gang shooting with very traumatized girlfriend, mother, and this is not the water in which I live, right? I don't understand. And that was the first time, guys, that I fully understood I don't get it. I don't get it. And I'm going to tell you something. We don't get it. There are things in this world that you and we don't get. We don't understand, and we couldn't possibly ever understand that. Even sitting in that moment, I realized I can't understand it. But I am responsible for it. And that's what I want us to hear today, because we have a choice. We can say, I don't get it. I'm never going to get it. That's not my world. Guess that's just the way it is. And we can go on with our lives, or we can say, you know what? I don't get it. I'm probably never going to get it, but I am responsible for it. I'm responsible for hoarding that box of Kleenex and praying with them and protecting them. I'm responsible for that because these are my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think that is the power of Dorcas / Tabitha / whatever you want to call her. She got it. She got that even though that wasn't her world, she might not understand all the things that those people were experiencing. She was responsible for it because those were her brothers and sisters in Christ. Because it is God's creation, even if we don't understand, we are responsible. It is our job to change it. It's our job to use our power to empower, not to take away, or not to cloak ourselves in our own fear and misunderstanding and our crippling fear that we could lose it. We're not going to lose it, guys. We're going to be okay. We're not going to lose anything. And if there's something that we could lose, we probably shouldn't have had it in the first place. And that's something I want us to hear. Because we're so afraid, aren't we? And if we're afraid, we're guilty. And if we're guilty, we're responsible. And if we're responsible, we can change it. And that's what I want us to look for at Dorcas, because she got it. She really, truly got it. And that is the power of the message today. And I want us to hear that because I understand how terrifying and hard it is. I don't want to lose my suburban home. I don't want to lose my little cars. I don't want to lose my health insurance. I don't want to lose my pensions. I don't want to lose being able to buy coffee when I want to buy coffee. And I get that that's ridiculous, but I don't want to lose it. And you all don't want me to lose it either because I get really mean. But we don't need to worry about the fear because there's nothing to fear. And if we can accept the message that we are responsible, then we can go out and do the same work that Dorcas did. And that is the work to which you and I are called.
We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you. heaven.